My name is Claire Harding. I'm 31, and if you met me, you'd probably describe me as put together. I have a stable job as a financial analyst in Boston, a one-bedroom apartment I pay for on my own, and a resume filled with internships, awards, and early promotions. From the outside, I've checked all the boxes. But let me tell you a secret. For most of my life, I thought that being responsible would earn me love. That if I was dependable enough, useful enough, quiet enough, the people closest to me would finally see me, not just as someone to lean on, but someone to care for. I believed this, until I opened a letter from my mother that shattered everything. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon in March. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, addressed in my mother's looping cursive. No return address, but I knew it the moment I saw the handwriting. I opened it on the elevator ride, up to my apartment, expecting maybe a belated birthday card or one of her awkward attempts to reconnect. Instead, it was a bill, an invoice from an auto dealership in Connecticut for $61, 238 on 38 hours. The purchaser, my younger brother, Ethan, the co-signer, me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I flipped the page. There were loan documents, insurance forms, a copy of the registration every page, with my forged signature at the bottom. Tucked in between the forms was a handwritten note from my mother. Claire, I'm sure you understand how important it is for Ethan to have reliable transportation. He just got a new job interview, and we didn't want to distract you with the details. Thank you for stepping up like you always do. The first payment is due April 1st. Love, Mom. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the envelope in one hand, the letter trembling in the other. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. In one sentence, she'd thanked me for being conned. In another, she'd assigned me a debt bigger than my student loans. And the worst part, I wasn't even surprised, because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, just the first time it had come with such blatant disregard. For years, I'd been the family fixer, the silent backbone. I was the one who picked up the pieces after Ethan dropped out of college 3 times. I was the one who helped out when my parents' property tax bill magically aligned with their renovation of the guest house. I was the one who paid off Ethan's $7,000 credit card bill after his failed NFT startup. Each time they said, "You're so fortunate, Claire. You have your life together. Can't you help?" Each time I said yes, hoping maybe this time it would be different. That this time they'd say thank you and mean it. That maybe they'd invite me over just because they missed me, not because they needed something. But this was something else. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the second ring, voice warm and breezy like she hadn't just committed financial fraud. "Claire, how are you, sweetheart?" "What is this?" I asked, cutting to the point. "I just opened a letter with an invoice for a $61,000 car I never agreed to co-sign for." "Oh," that she said as if I were overreacting. "Sweetheart, we didn't want to burden you. Ethan needed a car for his upcoming job interview, and it just made sense." "You forged my signature," I said, ice in my voice. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she sighed. "We knew you'd want to help, and you make enough to cover it. It's not like you're struggling." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't beg to be seen. I simply ended the call. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. That night, I lay awake on my bed, staring at the ceiling. I replayed every moment I'd given in, every time I'd said yes when I meant no, every time I'd swallowed resentment like cough syrup, because family comes first. But what is family really? Is it the people who use your success as an excuse to fail? Is it the people who only show up when they need a bailout? Is it the people who lie, manipulate, and steal from you and call it love? By morning, I knew I had to make a choice. Keep playing the part they wrote for me, or write a new script. I poured myself a cup of coffee, pulled out my laptop, and typed into Google, "What to do if someone forges your signature on a car loan?" Because this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. This time, I was going to protect myself, even if it meant losing everyone I thought I needed. The thing you need to know about Ethan is that he was always the golden boy. From the moment he was born, the world bent to make room for his charm. Teachers loved him even when he forgot homework. Neighbors excused him even when he dented their mailbox. And our parents, Well, they treated him like he was made of stardust. I, on the other hand, was made of checklists and consequences. When I brought home straight A's, I was told, "That's what we expect from you." When Ethan passed a single class with a C, he got a pizza party. When he lied, he was misunderstood. When I spoke up, I was too intense. I became the family accountant before I hit puberty balancing chores, grades expectations, while Ethan learned he never had to finish what he started because someone else would clean it up. That someone was always me. The first time he dropped out of college, I was 23 and working 2 internships while studying for the CFA exam. My parents called me in tears, saying he was just overwhelmed, and could I help cover the rent on his off-campus apartment until he got back on his feet. They promised it was temporary. It wasn't. He dropped out again, and again. Each time the excuses grew more creative. He was too creative for traditional learning. He was exploring his entrepreneurial side. Meanwhile, I was quietly paying down his debts and hiding my own burnout behind smiles at the office. You might ask, why didn't you just say no? Because the guilt was generational. My mother had a way of making her disappointment sound like concern. "Claire, you know Ethan looks up to you. If you abandon him, what message does that send?" And my father, stern, meticulous, and emotionally absent, only ever praised me for being reliable. I didn't want to lose the one compliment I'd earned. But that letter, God, that letter, it wasn't just a financial betrayal. It was a confession of what I'd always known, but never said aloud, that to them I wasn't a daughter. I was a backup plan, a bank account with a heartbeat, a silent partner in their family fantasy, expected to carry the weight so Ethan could float. I found myself scrolling through old family photos that weekend, looking for something, some moment that proved I'd been seen. There we were at Ethan's high school graduation. He's beaming in the center. I'm off to the side, half smiling, holding his cap and gown. My mother had captioned it, "So proud of our Ethan. Claire helped him so much." Helped. That was my entire role. And I thought, how many more years of my life am I going to give away for free? It was Sunday when Ethan called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hey, Mum said you were being weird about the car thing." "It's just a cosign, Claire. I'll pay it off. You know I'm good for it." He wasn't. He never had been. I didn't return the call. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I booked an appointment with a lawyer. I'd never been in a courtroom in my life. I was the rule follower, the silent fixer. But something inside me had snapped, and not in a loud, messy way. It was quieter, sharper, like a thread that had finally frayed past the point of repair. The legal assistant who answered the phone was kind. She didn't act surprised when I said my parents had forged my signature. In fact, she sighed softly and said, "We see a lot of family fraud, actually." That sentence stayed with me. Family fraud. It sounded like an oxymoron, but I knew it wasn't. The lawyer, Ms. Natalie Hoffman, was professional and calm. She asked for documents, screenshots, anything I had. I emailed her the loan packet, the note from my mother Ethan's voicemail. She replied within an hour. "We have a strong case. I recommend reporting this to the lender and filing a fraud affidavit." I stared at the words, heart racing. The next steps were clear, tangible, actionable. But emotionally, I was still wading through decades of quicksand. That night, I sat on my fire escape, watching the city glow in gold and steel. For the first time in a long time, I wondered what my life might look like if I stopped being responsible for everyone else. If I stopped believing that love meant sacrifice. If I stopped being the good one. The letter didn't just break me. It gave me permission to stop pretending I was okay with being used. I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and for the first time since the invoice arrived, I slept through the night. Because deep down I knew this wasn't just about the car. It was about reclaiming my name. And I was just getting started. Before the car, before the lawyer, before everything cracked open, there was Christmas. Or rather a Christmas, one that happened without me. It had been 2 weeks before the letter arrived. A Saturday afternoon in early December. I was sitting at my favorite corner cafe near the public garden, nursing a lavender tea and scrolling through my phone on autopilot. Work had been draining, and the holidays always brought a cocktail of guilt and exhaustion. I wasn't excited, but I was trying. That's when I saw it. A post from my cousin Sophie. A carousel of photos. Early Christmas with the Hardings. So grateful for family. There they were. My parents. Ethan. My aunt and uncle. Even my grandfather, who hadn't left Connecticut in years. The tree was lit presents stacked high, my mother in her signature red cashmere. Everyone gathered around the long table in our childhood home, laughing full plates in front of them. Everyone but me. I blinked, refreshed the screen, searched my texts. Nothing. No message. No invitation. Not even a passing mention that a gathering was happening. I hadn't been forgotten, I'd been deliberately excluded. My hands shook as I dialed my mother. She answered on the third ring, chipper as ever. Claire. How lovely to hear from you. Was there a Christmas party last weekend? I asked flatly. A pause. Well, yes, just something casual. Very last minute. I wasn't invited. Oh, sweetheart, we figured you were busy with work. And Ethan said you'd mentioned having plans. I didn't. Well, regardless, it wasn't formal. Just some close family. You're still coming for Christmas Day, right? I was stunned silent. My mother continued breezily. Besides, you know how Ethan gets. He's been in a fragile place. We didn't want any tension. Tension, that was code. Their favorite excuse. It always meant you are the problem and we'll remove you rather than address it. I hung up before I could cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want her to hear it. That night I curled up on the couch and tried to rationalize it away. Maybe they'd really assumed I was busy. Maybe it hadn't been planned long. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Then Aunt Lorraine texted, "We missed you at the big party last weekend. The tree looked amazing this year. Your mum went all out. So much for last minute." I stared at the message until it blurred. What hurt the most wasn't just the exclusion, it was the ease of it. How seamlessly they'd erased me from the picture. And how once again Ethan's comfort was prioritized over my presence. I called Margaret the next morning. She was my childhood neighbor. She used to babysit us when we were little, long before my parents got too self-important to let anyone outside the family in. She'd always been kind to me, gentle, the sort of woman who made tea when she could have scolded. "Come for dinner," she said immediately after I choked through my explanation. "You shouldn't spend Christmas alone, Claire. Not for people who treat you like an option." So I did. Christmas Eve at Margaret's was simple, warm, and utterly unfamiliar. A fire in the hearth. Classical jazz on the radio. Her grandkids zoomed around in footy pajamas. No one talked over each other. No one asked what I was buying for Ethan or why I was still single. They just asked me how I was doing and waited for the answer. On Christmas Day, we baked cranberry bread. I wore socks with reindeer on them and laughed until my ribs hurt. At one point, Margaret's daughter pulled me aside and said, "My mom talks about you all the time. She says you've always been the brave one." No one had ever said that to me before. Later that night, I got a text from Ethan. "Hope your solo Christmas was fun. BTW need help picking out Mom's birthday gift. Thinking something with diamonds. You always know what she likes." I stared at it stunned. No apology, no acknowledgement, just another ask, another transaction. That was the night I made a quiet vow to myself. I'm done pretending these people are my family just because we share blood. Because that night with Margaret and the chaos of real messy love swirling around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that wraps around you like a hand-knit scarf. The kind that doesn't come with strings or receipts. That peace wouldn't last, of course. The letter arrived a few weeks later, and peace gave way to war. But looking back, I know that Christmas was the first crack in the wall I'd spent my whole life building. The first time I saw that love could be warm, not transactional. That being included didn't have to come at the cost of self-worth. It was the first time I stopped begging to belong and started choosing where I felt safe. The thing about transactional love is you don't realize it's happening until you start keeping score. And I had started keeping score, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because love in my family didn't come with hugs or heartfelt conversations. It came with invoices veiled as favors. A dinner invite meant I'd be asked to chip in for Ethan's bills. A phone call from my mother meant there was a crisis, and holidays always had a price tag. After Christmas, I opened a spreadsheet. It started as therapy, a way to make sense of what I had given, A way to prove to myself I wasn't exaggerating. But as the list grew, so did the pit in my stomach. $7,000 to cover Ethan's failed NFT business, $200 for my parents' property tax emergency, $950 to help rescue Ethan's dog, which he later gave away, $40,600 for new appliances after their kitchen remodel unexpectedly went over budget, $800 for Mum's charity gala when her donor dropped out, $12,000 for Ethan's community college tuition, which he never finished, and that wasn't even counting the co-signed loans, or the countless dinner surprise bills and Venmo requests labeled family support. When I looked at the total, I had to sit down. Over $46,000 in 5 years. I stared at the number for a long time, and then I cried, not for the money but for what it represented, because not once had anyone asked if I could afford it. Not once had anyone said thank you in a way that felt real. Every dollar was expected, every favor absorbed into a bottomless pit of entitlement. I wasn't a sister. I was an ATM with a pulse. One night I told all this to Margaret. She listened quietly, holding her tea like it was a sacred object. "Have they ever given you anything you didn't have to earn?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "Then that's not love," she said. "That's leverage." The word sat heavy in the air. Leverage. And suddenly I could see it. Every gift, every compliment, every rare moment of kindness was a down payment, a hook for a future ask. Even when they were kind, it wasn't free. A few days later, Ethan texted again. "Need to talk. You are being unfair about the car. Call me." I didn't answer. He called. Left a voicemail. Then another. By the 5th message, he wasn't pretending anymore. "Mom says you're making this a bigger deal than it is. I'll pay it back. Eventually. Don't be petty." Petty. That's what it was called when I refused to subsidize their choices. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer, Natalie. She replied simply, "You're doing the right thing. Document everything." Still doubt crept in. What if I was overreacting? What if I was punishing them for a lifetime of things I should have gotten over? That's when I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. My 25th birthday. I had just received my first major promotion. I invited my parents and Ethan out to celebrate at a nice restaurant. Paid for the meal myself. Gave each of them small, thoughtful gifts, customized, meaningful. My mother gave me a card. Inside was a photo of Ethan in his new apartment. "We're so proud of all you've done," she'd written. "But we're especially proud of how you've helped Ethan. We couldn't have done this without you." That was my birthday card. A thank you note for supporting someone else. I'd filed it away at the time as typical. Now I saw it clearly. Their pride in me was conditional, tied directly to my usefulness. My success wasn't celebrated unless it served Ethan. Love had always come with receipts, and now they had tried to forge one more literally. The car loan wasn't the beginning. It was the end of a long, twisted transaction. The final favor they'd tried to extract before the well ran dry. So I made a decision. I drafted an email to my parents, to Ethan, to everyone involved. Going forward, all communication about finances must go through my attorney. Any further attempts to use my personal information or access my accounts will be reported as fraud. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I locked every account I owned, changed passwords, froze my credit, opened new bank accounts at a different institution, filed a fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus. Because I wasn't just trying to escape the car loan. I was building a wall around the life I had built, the life I had earned. The next day, my father called me for the first time in weeks. I answered, hoping naively that maybe he would say something human. He didn't. "Claire," he said, voice tight, "if you pursue this fraud nonsense, you can consider yourself cut off from this family. Permanently." I paused, let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Thank you for finally saying it out loud," and hung up. My hands shook, but my heart didn't. Because in that moment I realized something vital. I hadn't lost my family. I had stopped renting space in a house that never had room for me. The moment I reported the fraud, something shifted inside me. I expected fear, maybe guilt. What I didn't expect was clarity. Filing that report wasn't just about the loan. It was a declaration: I see what you've done. I'm not pretending anymore. The bank representative, Robert, was calm and precise. He confirmed my identity, reviewed the documents I sent, and said he would begin an internal investigation. "This happens more often than you'd think," he added quietly, as if that would soften the blow. But it didn't. Because while fraud may be common, betrayal by your own family never gets easier to swallow. That same afternoon, Natalie, my lawyer, called. "We'll need to submit affidavits, notarized statements, and copies of all your correspondence," she said. "But Claire, this case is strong. Your mother's handwritten note alone is damning." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'd read that note a dozen times. Every word was casual, even affectionate, like she thought what she did was normal. Like this wasn't a felony, but a family favor. I was beginning to understand something I hadn't wanted to believe before. My mother didn't think she did anything wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the signature, the way they mimicked my handwriting so easily, the fact that they didn't even ask. It wasn't a desperate plea, it was a calculation. They knew I wouldn't agree, so they simply removed the obstacle of my consent. It wasn't just betrayal, it was ownership. They thought they owned me, my success, my credit score, my savings, my identity, and maybe for a long time they were right, but not anymore. The next morning, I logged into all my financial accounts to double-check everything was secure. Most of it was untouched, except for one. My emergency fund savings account, where I kept money for a down payment on a future home, had triggered a login attempt the day before. A failed attempt. The alert showed the attempt came from a recognized device, my old laptop, the one I had gifted to my parents last year when I upgraded. My chest tightened. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a system, a quiet network of access and entitlement built on the belief that my life was communal property. I changed every password. I added two-factor authentication. I set up a notification system that would ping me if anything moved. I locked everything down. And then I did something even harder. I wrote an email to my HR department. "Hi, I'm reaching out regarding a personal legal matter that may result in occasional scheduling conflicts over the next few weeks. I'd like to request flexible work hours as I handle this situation." I'd always kept work and personal life separate, but I couldn't anymore. Later that afternoon, my boss Sandra called. "Claire, is everything okay?" I hesitated. Then I told her the truth. My parents forged my signature on a car loan for my brother. "I'm working with a lawyer. It's complicated." There was a pause. Then Sandra said, "I'm sorry, that's awful, and brave of you to take action." She didn't ask intrusive questions. She didn't doubt me. She just supported me. In that moment, I felt more seen than I had in 30 years of being a Harding. The next few days passed in a haze. I waited for the bank's decision. I checked my credit every morning. I recorded every voicemail from Ethan and every email from my parents. Some were guilt trips. "Claire, you're breaking your mother's heart." Some were manipulative. "Don't forget all the things we've done for you." And some were straight up delusional. "You're ruining Ethan's life. Do you really want that on your conscience?" But none of them said the one thing I needed to hear. "I'm sorry." Because they weren't sorry. They were scrambling. On Friday, I received a call from Robert at the bank. "Miss Harding, we've completed our investigation. Based on the evidence, we've confirmed that your signature was forged on the loan documents. We will be removing the loan from your name and notifying the dealership. The vehicle is scheduled for repossession." I thanked him, hung up and stared at the wall. The car, the $61,000 Mercedes GLC coupe, would be gone within days. Ethan would wake up to an empty parking space, and my parents, they would finally face consequences. It should have felt like a victory, and in some ways it did. But the grief came too, because despite everything, despite the manipulation, the fraud, the silence, I had still wanted to believe they could change, that they would recognize the line they crossed and step back, but they hadn't. They doubled down, and now I was the one pulling away for good. That night, I opened the box where I kept family photos. One by one, I sorted through them. Me as a child with braces standing stiffly next to Ethan. Family vacations, birthday parties. My parents smiling their arms around us like we were perfect. I didn't throw them away, but I closed the box and shoved it to the back of the closet, because I was done carrying a past that didn't belong to me anymore. 2 days after the bank confirmed the repossession, my phone exploded. It started with Ethan, 6 missed calls, then a voicemail that began in confusion and ended in rage. They took the car. "Claire, I'm at the mall stranded. What the hell is wrong with you? You've ruined my life. You think this makes you the good guy? I didn't respond. Next came my mother. A text that read, "You've broken this family. Are you proud your father can't sleep, and Ethan is humiliated? This isn't who we raised you to be." I wanted to laugh at the irony. This is who they raised me to be: responsible, accommodating, invisible. But now that I'd stopped playing that role, I was suddenly the villain. An hour later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. A selfie of Ethan looking distraught in front of the empty parking space where the Mercedes had once been. Captioned, "When your own sister ruins your only shot at a decent life." Betrayed by blood. I blocked the number. Then I deactivated all my social media accounts. Because this was no longer just family drama. It was a coordinated smear campaign. By evening, I had voicemails from extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "Aunt Rachel, I heard about what happened. Family is everything, Claire. This could have been handled privately." "Uncle Dennis, your mother is in tears. Do you really want her to go to jail over a misunderstanding?" Even my cousin Sophie, the one who posted the Christmas photos, chimed in. "Whatever's going on, you could have just talked it out. I mean, it's just a car. Just a car. Just $61,000. Just fraud. Just a complete violation of my autonomy." I forwarded all the voicemails and messages to Natalie. She responded with instructions. "Document everything. Do not reply. The pressure is designed to make you fold." But the most disturbing call came from my workplace. My boss, Sandra, pulled me aside at the end of the day. "Claire, your father called the office." I froze. "He said he was concerned about your mental health, that you might be experiencing a financial breakdown. He asked if I thought you should be handling client portfolios right now." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "He did what?" Sandra put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, I know what he's trying to do. I told him we don't discuss employee matters with third parties. But Claire, this is serious. He's crossing lines." I nodded, breath-catching, because in that moment, I understood just how far they were willing to go, not just to avoid consequences, but to destroy my credibility if it meant regaining control. They weren't acting out of love. They were defending a system, a hierarchy, and in their minds I had defected. Later that night, I met with my financial advisor, Marcus. He was in his 60s sharp and didn't mince words. "Based on what you've told me, I recommend a full firewall." Meaning, new bank accounts, new credit cards, different financial institutions, updated beneficiaries, close everything they might know or access. Also, a full credit audit immediately. He was right. And thank God he was, because the credit audit revealed yet another breach, a failed application for a luxury furniture store credit card in my name, filed just 2 days after the car loan had been approved. It had been flagged due to the fraud alert I placed with Equifax. But still, it proved a terrifying truth. The car was only the beginning. If I hadn't caught it in time, they might have kept going, one fraudulent form at a time, until my financial identity wasn't mine anymore. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because of anger. Deep bone-level anger I had never allowed myself to feel before. For 31 years, I had swallowed it, coated it in duty, rebranded it as resilience. But now I saw it clearly. They were not just toxic, they were dangerous. And I was not going to be their collateral anymore. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Ethan, sloppily written, clearly drunk. "You think are so much better, but are just a cold betch. Mom and Dad only put up WWU $4. We all laugh, ooh. It was vile, cruel, but it was also honest. Drunken honesty, but honesty nonetheless. And it confirmed what I had been afraid to admit. They didn't love me, not really. They loved what I could provide, what I made easier, what I cleaned up. But me, Claire, I was a tool, a resource, a lifeline. And now that I'd cut the rope, they were drowning. But I wasn't going back in after them. Not this time. I sat on my couch phone in one hand, rage cooling into resolve. Then I called Natalie. "I'm ready," I told her. "Ready for what?" "To go all the way. Let's file the formal charges." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "Because once we start, there's no undoing this." I thought about the forged signature, the fake applications, the attempts to access my savings, the calls to my boss, the betrayal. I'm sure I said. And for the first time in months, maybe years. I meant it. The process moved quickly after I gave Natalie the green light. Within 3 days, the fraud report was finalized and submitted. The bank formally removed my name from the auto loan, and the Mercedes Ethan's shiny status-boosting Mercedes was officially marked for repossession. Natalie kept me in the loop with each step, calm, precise. She told me to expect resistance, but I didn't expect it to come so soon, or so loud. It was 11:46 a.m. on a Tuesday when the first message landed. Ethan, you fucking psycho. They towed my car in front of the gym, in front of everyone. You did this, you're pathetic, you'll regret it. Then a stream of texts from numbers I didn't recognize. You ruined your brother's life. Wow, Claire, family means nothing to you. You're seriously messed up. The phone buzzed until it burned hot in my hand. I blocked the numbers one by one. Then I set the phone down and let the silence settle. I'd expected rage. What I didn't expect was the sheer desperation behind it. Like I'd unplugged them from the power source, and now they were scrambling in the dark. My father called next. I let it go to voicemail. His tone was different this time, controlled but shaking beneath the surface. You crossed a line. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Ethan is humiliated. You think this is justice, you've made a permanent enemy of this family. I listened to it once, then deleted it. I didn't need their anger echoing in my apartment. By sundown, I had blocked not just my immediate family, but over 20 relatives, friends of friends, even an old family friend who sent me a Bible verse about forgiveness. It felt like cutting off limbs, but it also felt like cauterizing a wound. When I logged on to Instagram that evening, just once out of curiosity, I saw it. A video, posted by Ethan, tear-streaked face, dramatic background music. Today my car was stolen, not by a stranger, but by my own sister, the one I trusted, the one I supported. Let this be a lesson, blood doesn't mean loyalty. I clicked away before it ended. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. OMG, I'm so sorry, bro. Some people are just jealous. She'll come crawling back. But I wouldn't, and I knew that now more than ever. The next morning, Natalie called. My mother's attorney had reached out. They're proposing a settlement, she said. What does that mean? They'll pay all legal fees, sign an admission of fraud, and enter a formal agreement never to access your finances or credit again. In exchange, you agree not to press criminal charges. I paused, surprised. I expected them to fight, to stall, to deny. But no, they were trying to cut their losses. They're scared, aren't they? I asked. Natalie didn't hesitate. Yes, the bank has documented evidence. Your mother's note, the forged signature, the credit alerts. If we press charges, she's looking at felony fraud, prison time. I took a deep breath. I had dreamed of this moment of making them answer for what they did, of seeing them punished, of finally being right. But now that I had the power, I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I'll take the deal, I said, but it has to be airtight, legally binding, no contact. Natalie agreed. The paperwork began immediately. While that was happening, I got an unexpected call. Aunt Linda, my father's sister. She'd always been the black sheep, never quite fitting in with my mother's socialite circle, never fully accepted, but always kind to me in a distant way. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you, she said. Someone needed to stand up to them. I never had the courage, but you did. I nearly cried. A few days later, another message. This time from my cousin Ryan, the same cousin who went mysteriously off-grid 5 years ago after a falling out with my parents. I heard what happened, he wrote. They did something similar to me with a timeshare. I paid it off just to make it stop. I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd fought like you did. One by one, the shadows lifted. I had thought I was alone. I wasn't. They had done this before, many times. I was just the first one who didn't cave. The day the settlement was finalized, I signed the documents with a trembling hand, not because I doubted myself, but because I was finally closing the door. No drama, no tears, just legal clarity. They were no longer my family in any meaningful way. And yet there was one more message, one I didn't expect, a text from an unknown number. It was Jessica, Ethan's girlfriend, the one who had always played neutral, the one who once told me, "You're so lucky to have a close family." Her text said, I don't know the full story, and I probably never will. But I saw how they talked about you behind your back. You were never the problem, Claire. Just the scapegoat. I didn't reply. But I took a screenshot and saved it. Because sometimes the smallest confirmation can hold the greatest weight. The Mercedes was gone. The loans erased. The lies exposed. And still I felt hollow. 'Cause I had lost something too. Not just a family. But the illusion of one. After the settlement was finalized, I expected to feel triumphant. I had won. Legally, financially, emotionally, I had taken back control. I had stopped the fraud, protected my identity, and cut ties with the people who had exploited me for decades. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. No more texts, no calls, no emergencies, no guilt trips, just space. And for someone like me, raised to expect constant crisis space didn't feel safe. It felt like failure. I was untethered. That's when I finally made the appointment. Dr. Laura Chen came highly recommended by a friend from work, a therapist who specialized in family systems trauma and boundary repair. She had kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and something vaguely herbal like safety in a bottle. I sat across from her, hands clenched, recounting the last few months: the Christmas exclusion, the forged loan, the smear campaign, the settlement. I said it all as if it were someone else's story. She listened silently. When I finished, she leaned forward and asked one simple question. If a friend told you this exact story, what would you tell them? I stared at her. My mouth opened, closed. And then I whispered I'd tell them to run and never look back. She nodded. So why is it different when it's you? I didn't have an answer. Not then. But I carried that question with me for days. Into my walks. Into the office. Into the grocery store where I used to shop for Mom's dinner parties. Into the quiet nights where I no longer checked my phone for emergencies. Why was it different? Why did I hold myself to a standard of endless patience? Why did I offer second, third, 10th chances? Why did I see cruelty as complexity and neglect as love? Because it was what I was taught. Love in my family came with a checklist. You earned it, proved it, maintained it. And now that I'd stopped performing, I felt like I didn't deserve anything at all. One evening after therapy, I decided to write a letter I'd never send. To myself. Not the adult version, but to the little girl who learned early how to hold everything together. Dear Claire, you didn't imagine it. It wasn't love. Not the way they taught you. You were not too much, or too serious, or too selfish. You were just a child trying to survive in a house that didn't see you. And now you're an adult who gets to build a different kind of life. One where love doesn't come with strings. One where you get to receive care, not just provide it. One where your name belongs to you. And you're allowed to protect it. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my journal. And then I started building that life. Piece by piece. I began volunteering at a local women's shelter on weekends. Something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I joined a book club. Started hiking with a few co-workers on Saturdays. Reached out to Margaret to help her plant spring vegetables in her tiny backyard garden. It wasn't some grand rebirth. It was slow, sometimes lonely, but it was real. In one therapy session, Dr. Chen said something else that stuck. Family trauma doesn't disappear, it morphs, it resurfaces. But healing is the process of noticing the pain and choosing differently. I was beginning to notice the patterns. How I apologized when I hadn't done anything wrong. How I hesitated before saying no even to strangers. How I still waited for the other shoe to drop even in moments of joy. But I also started noticing new things, like how peaceful it felt to cook a meal for one. Like how laughter around a bonfire with people who chose me meant more than any holiday photo. Like how Margaret hugged me when I brought over soup during her cold and whispered, "You feel like family, Claire." That night I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Because family, the real kind, wasn't gone. It was growing, quietly, in unexpected places. One Tuesday morning, as I walked to work with coffee in hand and spring light on my face, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Cousin Taylor, the one who had posted the Christmas photos, who never responded when I reached out after being excluded. Her message was short. I know I hurt you. I didn't understand the full story. But I'm seeing things now. And I'm sorry. If you're ever open to talking, I'd like to listen. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know if I could trust her, but the message mattered because it was the first time someone from that side of the family admitted the truth was more complicated than they were told. Maybe it wouldn't lead anywhere, but maybe, just maybe, it meant the cycle was beginning to crack. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the broken one. I felt like the one who had finally stopped pretending. If you've never said no to someone who thinks they own you, let me tell you, it doesn't go quietly. After the settlement, I thought things would settle down. No more letters, no more calls, no more orchestrated smear campaigns. I was wrong. The legal boundaries were in place. But emotional boundaries, they don't come with enforcement agents. About a week after I finished that unsent letter to my younger self, my phone buzzed with an alert. Another attempted login on one of my old bank accounts. This one came from an unfamiliar IP address. The bank flagged it and locked the account immediately, thanks to the fraud protections I'd set up with Marcus. Still, I spent the afternoon on the phone with their security team, tightening every access point like I was preparing for war. Because that's what it still felt like, war. A cold one, but no less exhausting. Every day I checked my credit report. Every day I scanned for the next line they'd try to cross. And every few days I'd get a new ping, an attempted password, reset a two-factor authentication code. I hadn't requested a notification from a utility company I didn't use. It was all noise, but I knew exactly who was making it. They weren't trying to get money anymore. They were trying to rattle me, to remind me that cutting contact wasn't the end, that even when they couldn't reach me, they could still haunt me. And for a while it worked. I started losing sleep again. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I second-guessed whether I should have taken a harder route, pressed charges, gone public, shamed them like they tried to shame me. But then, during a routine session, Dr. Chen said something that stopped me cold. "You're doing something radical, Claire. You're refusing to be the sacrifice anymore. And people who are used to taking don't go quietly when the giving stops." That hit me in the chest, because that's exactly what it was. They weren't mourning me. They were mourning their access to me. A few days later, I was walking home from the office when I saw it, a post on Ethan's Instagram, public of course, a photo of him standing next to a different car now, a modest used sedan. The caption read, "Some people will try to destroy what you love, but karma always balances the scales." Still standing, sure blessed. The comment section was flooded. "You're so strong. She didn't deserve you. Glad you're rising above." I closed the app, not angry, not sad, just tired. That was when I knew the war was over, but they were still playing. And I didn't have to play anymore. That weekend, I met Margaret and her neighbor friends for a cookout. We grilled vegetables, shared stories, and someone brought homemade lemonade that was way too strong with vodka, but no one cared. There was laughter, sunlight, simplicity. No one asked what I did for a living. No one asked if I had forgiven my family yet. No one made me feel like I owed them anything to earn my seat at the table. When I got home that night, I turned on the lamp in my apartment, the one my mother had once called depressingly cheap, and I smiled, because it was mine, because all of it was mine. The peace, the silence, the hard-won solitude. I still had moments of ache. On Sundays especially. That was the day our family used to do brunch me cooking, while Ethan complained about hangovers, Dad reading the paper, Mom assigning me chores as a favor. It had never been restful, but it had been routine. And sometimes even dysfunction can feel like home. But that ache didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me that I had chosen differently, that I had paid a price and gained my freedom. And then came the text that surprised me most of all. It came through a work colleague's number. A message forwarded from Jessica, my brother's on and off girlfriend, who I hadn't heard from since the fallout. "I hate what you did, but I get it now. They've started doing it to me. Your mom's expecting me to pay for Thanksgiving. When I said I couldn't, your dad suggested I dip into my 401k. Sound familiar? I remembered what you said, about buying what you can actually afford. Don't reply. I'll deny I sent this. Just wanted you to know. I read it twice, 3 times. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't an apology, but it was something else, something heavier. An acknowledgement that I hadn't made it up, that I wasn't the villain, that I was simply the first to say no. And if Jessica, of all people, was beginning to see the pattern, maybe others would too. But even if they didn't, it didn't matter, because I wasn't living for their approval anymore. I was living for something better, peace that didn't require my silence, love that didn't require my sacrifice, and a life that finally felt like my own. It's funny how you don't notice the weight you've been carrying until you finally set it down. That was how it felt walking into Margaret's house on a quiet Sunday afternoon in May. The air smelled like lemon bars and old wood, and the radio was playing something soft from the 60s. There was no agenda, no tension. Just an open seat at a round table and a teapot already warming. Margaret wasn't related to me. She never raised her voice to demand my presence, never asked for favors, never guilted me into showing up. And yet she was the first person to say, "You are welcome here, just as you are." She had always felt like a side character in my life, a neighbor, a babysitter, a holiday stopover. But now, in the quiet fallout from my family's unraveling, she was something else entirely. She was home. That Sunday, Margaret's daughter Annie joined us. She was my age, funny and quick to laugh. She asked about my work, not in the way my mother used to, fishing for status, but with genuine curiosity. "And how are you feeling about it?" she asked, after I told her about my promotion. No one had ever asked me that. I blinked, honestly proud, but tired. She nodded. "That sounds like growth." Later, we made sandwiches in the kitchen, and Margaret touched my arm gently. "You seem lighter," she said. I hadn't realized it until she said it, but I was. Not happy all the time, not carefree, but unburdened. There was a difference. At work, things had shifted too. My boss, Sandra, who had once been just a firm professional presence, now treated me with something close to mentorship. She invited me to meetings I normally wouldn't be in. She listened when I had ideas. She protected my space without being asked. And not once did she mention my family. Because I wasn't the girl with drama in her eyes. I was the woman who took care of herself. Even friendships I had neglected were starting to bloom again. I had coffee with Jules, a college roommate I hadn't seen in 5 years. We used to be inseparable before life pulled us into different cities, different jobs, different griefs. "I saw something in your eyes when you walked in," she said over lattes. "You used to be so careful, Claire. Now you look free." I told her the whole story. She listened without interruption, just nodding her eyes wide and fierce. "You didn't just leave a toxic family," she said when I finished. "You walked away from a whole system that told you your worth was measured in what you gave." I hadn't thought of it that way, but it was true. Everywhere I looked now, I saw small signs of life that had once been buried under obligation. My apartment, once quiet and sterile, now had color. A record player, humming jazz in the evenings. A new rug that didn't match anything but made me happy. Plants I was learning not to kill. One evening, while reading on the couch, I caught myself smiling for no reason. No text to answer, no loans to cover, no invisible scoreboard to maintain. Just peace, and I realized something else. I had spent so long grieving the family I didn't have. I hadn't stopped to notice the one I was building. Not the kind that's bound by DNA. The kind you create. The kind that comes over with soup when you're sick, sends you memes at midnight, remembers how you take your coffee. The kind that doesn't track what you've given, but delights in who you are. The kind that says, "You don't owe us anything. We're just glad you're here." Margaret's house became a haven. Every Sunday I showed up, sometimes with pie, sometimes with nothing, sometimes just needing to cry or say nothing at all. And no matter what, someone always made room for me. Family Margaret said one day slicing strawberries for shortcake is not who calls you when they need something. It's who notices when you're quiet and shows up anyway. I thought about all the years I'd performed for people who didn't care to know me. And here around a wooden table, with chipped mugs and peeling paint, I felt more seen than I ever had. One night, Annie invited me to a backyard movie night. A few neighbors, a white sheet against the fence, fairy lights in mason jars. We watched Moonstruck and passed popcorn around like communion. At one point during a scene where Cher slaps Nicolas Cage and says "snap out of it," I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Not the polite kind. Not the controlled chuckle. The kind that bursts out because you're safe enough to lose control. That night, walking home under the glow of porch lights and a crescent moon, I realized This was the life I had been trying to earn from people who never intended to give it. This was the table I thought I needed to beg to sit at, only to discover I could build my own. With mismatched chairs, with fewer people, but with more love. And no receipts. Some truths don't come in calm conversations or neatly packaged apologies. Some truths come slurred, misspelled, and dripping with venom at 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's how it came from Ethan. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, not since the car repossession, not since the family fallout and public pity posts. I had his number blocked, but he found another way. A burner number, maybe Jessica's phone, maybe someone else's. The text read, "You think are so smart, so clean, so put together, but no one loves you. No one ever did. Not Mom, not Dad. They put up with her because you made them look good. We laugh at you, Claire. You always thought you were better, but are just a lonely barch. You have nothing." I stared at the words, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with clarity, because it was the truth. The unvarnished, unfiltered truth from someone too intoxicated to maintain the family lie. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, every doubt I'd ever had evaporated. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This wasn't about poor communication or generational gaps. This was about exploitation. This was about contempt wrapped in obligation. This was about a family that had never actually loved me but had loved what I did for them. I took a screenshot, saved it in a locked folder, not for revenge, for remembrance, because gaslighting is powerful. And in dark moments I'd catch myself wondering, was it really that bad? Now I had proof, not for others but for me. The next day I told Dr. Chen. She read the message slowly, quietly. Then she looked up and said, "He thinks this is a weapon, but it's your freedom." I nodded. She was right. That message, cruel as it was, finally released me from the last chain I hadn't noticed was still wrapped around my ankles. Hope. Hope that they'd change, that they'd apologize, that somehow, if I just said it right, did it right, gave enough, they'd see me. But they wouldn't, because they didn't want to. And that realization, it wasn't just freeing, it was clarifying. The villain had unmasked himself not in anger but in honesty, and I was no longer in the audience. I was off the stage, out the door, gone. Later that week, I had dinner with Jules and some of her friends. One of them, a woman named Ray, worked in restorative justice. We got to talking about boundaries and what they cost. She said something I'll never forget. People think setting boundaries will ruin their relationships. What they don't realize is it reveals the truth about the relationship that already existed. Exactly. When I said no, when I reported the fraud, when I cut off contact, they didn't fight for me. They punished me. Because I had stepped out of my role. I was supposed to be the fixer, the donor, the good daughter, and when I became something else, something whole, they responded like I had betrayed them. Because to them, my healing was betrayal. The next morning, I got an email from Taylor. Not a text, an email, which already told me she was treading carefully. "Hi, Claire. I don't want to invade your peace, but I've been thinking about everything, especially Christmas, especially the way everyone handled it. I didn't understand back then. I really didn't. I believed the version they told me because it was easier, but I've seen how they've talked about you, how they rewrite stories, and I've started noticing things they say about me too. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I see it now. If you're ever open to reconnecting on your terms, I'd like that. No pressure." I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and went for a walk. Not because I didn't want to respond, but because I had learned to sit with things, to let them breathe, to stop rushing toward resolution. Later, I wrote back, "Thank you for this. It means more than you know. I'm open to reconnecting with honesty and without expectation. Slow is okay." That weekend, we met for coffee. Neutral ground, a small cafe with hanging plants and sunlight pooling through tall windows. We talked for 2 hours about growing up, about family stories that didn't quite add up, about the silence we both had participated in. "I used to think you were just cold," she said softly, "but now I see you were trying to survive." I smiled. "I used to think I had to be perfect to be safe. You don't." "I know. We didn't hug when we left. We weren't ready for that. But we promised to meet again. And that was enough." That night I lit a candle in my living room, not for mourning, for gratitude, for the tiny cautious reconnections that come after fire. For the people who come back, not with demands but with truth. For the ones who finally see you, even if it took a lifetime. A full year after the first letter, the one with the forged signature and the $61,000 bill, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote another one. Not to my mother, not to Ethan, not to any of the people who had tried to drain me dry and call it love. This letter was for me. I had just returned from a weekend at Margaret's lake house. Her daughter Annie had hosted a small gathering for close friends. No drama, no obligations, just wine, music, laughter, and a warmth that didn't have to be earned. They gave me the guest room with the little quilted blanket that smelled like cedar and wildflowers. At one point, Annie toasted during dinner and said to chosen family, the kind that doesn't expect you to bleed just to be invited. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt it deep in my chest, that sense of arrival, of being wanted, not for my usefulness, not for my silence, but for my presence. So when I came home, I knew what I had to do. I lit a candle, made tea, sat down at the table, and began to write. Dear Claire, you survived things you weren't supposed to name out loud. You told the truth even when it cost you everything you thought you needed to belong. You stopped performing love and started receiving it. You chose peace over legacy. And now, you are free. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer where I keep my passport, my real ID, the one no one else forged or faked, because now I knew who I was. The journey hadn't been clean. It hadn't been brave every moment. There were nights I curled up in bed, wondering if I'd done the right thing, wondering if maybe I should have let it go. Let the car go. Let the betrayal slide. Let the silence win. But I hadn't. And thank God for that. I think about the version of myself that received that first letter. How small she felt. How afraid she was of being cut off because she didn't yet know that disconnection from people who hurt you is not loss. It's liberation. Now, a year later, the world feels different. Not easier, but truer. I've restructured my finances. I've rebuilt my credit. I've stopped feeling like I owe people access to my life simply because they share my last name. I've learned how to pause before responding. How to say that doesn't work for me. How to say I need space. How to say nothing at all when a response would only restart the cycle. Most importantly, I've learned what family really means. Family is who brings soup when you're sick. Family is who celebrates your growth without asking what it costs them. Family is who respects your no and doesn't punish you for it. This Christmas, I'll be in Vermont with Leah and her family in their cabin. There's no drama, no forced games of charades, no whispered insults under the guise of jokes. Just a roaring fire, too many scarves, and hot cocoa that burns your tongue. On Christmas Eve, I'll volunteer at the shelter again, bring warm meals, share quiet conversation, listen to stories from women who, like me, are learning to rebuild after betrayal. And on New Year's, I'll be with friends. We'll toast to survival, to boundaries, to beginnings. Will there still be grief? Yes, grief for the mother who never mothered. Grief for the childhood I tried so hard to edit into something pretty. Grief for the version of me who believed she had to buy her place at the table. But the grief no longer runs the show. It visits, and I let it. And then I let it go. I used to believe that walking away from your family meant failure. Now I know it's sometimes the bravest form of self-respect. To anyone watching this who sees even a piece of their own story in mine, I want you to know, you are not broken for needing boundaries. You are not selfish for protecting your peace, and you are not alone. There is a life on the other side of no. It's quieter, smaller maybe, but it's yours. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your survival. And love, real love, never comes with an invoice. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of it resonated with you, drop a comment. I'd love to hear how you chose yourself too. And remember, sometimes the letter that breaks you is also the one that sets you free.